Hey, everybody. So, welcome to the webinar today talking all about preparing for natural childbirth. So, this is something I'm super passionate about, helping women, helping families make informed decisions about their upcoming birth and helping them achieve their goals. And if your goal is to have a natural childbirth, then there's nothing that gives me more pleasure than helping you reach that goal. Being pregnant, giving birth, it's all about making decisions, right? It's sort of your first taste of parenthood where you have to make all these decisions that don't just affect you, but affect your baby, affect your child as well. So being pregnant, it's one of those really transformative times in someone's life. And people usually have so many questions, and I love being able to give some of those answers. Excuse me. So for those who have not met me before, I'm Samantha Lee Wright. I'm one of the co-owners here at High Country Doulas. High Country Doulas was founded 2 years ago by myself and my best friend, Allison Rollins, who happened to be my doula for my first birth. And before we opened High Country Doulas, we each worked individually as doulas by ourselves. So I've been a doula for about 7 years now, and I've helped many families deliver and help them make the best out of their birth experience. I myself have 2 children. They are now 6 and 4 years old, and I delivered them both here in our local area and both without pain medication. So that was really important to me. When I was pregnant, I knew I really wanted to experience everything that birth had to offer me. And I've always been a little bit of a birth junkie. So for me, it was just something that I knew that I wanted to do. That being said, as a doula, I've worked with many parents, not all of them natural childbirth being their goal. Some of my clients know going in that they want to maybe get to a certain point and they want my help getting to a certain point, and then they want to get an epidural. And then they want my company from there, and they still want me to hold their hand and rub their shoulders and cheer them on through that experience. And then some clients that kind of just want to wait and see. It's their first time. They have no idea what it's going to be like, right? So they're not sure how it's all going to play out. And I enjoy helping people through that experience as well. So let's get started. For this webinar today, we are going to focus on ways to prepare for a natural childbirth. So first, we're going to talk a little bit about what does it even mean to have a quote unquote natural birth, talk a little bit more about epidurals, and then we're going to talk about things you can do in pregnancy to prepare, nutrition, exercises, and then I'm going to talk a little bit more about some practical things you can do in labor that can really help with your success goal if your goal is to have a natural birth. So what does it mean to have a natural birth? Now, if anyone's ever taken my childbirth class, they know that I can get a little soapboxy when it comes to the language that we use here. I don't actually like the term natural childbirth because, that just implies so much. If someone does end up needing an epidural or needing Pitocin or needing a cesarean, that's not to say that your birth is in any way unnatural. It just needed a little bit of extra tools to help it be a healthy, successful birth. So, but that aside, we do like to use the term natural childbirth to basically mean a labor and delivery without the use of drugs. So, and the main drug of choice, of course, being an epidural. Now, an epidural is not the only drug of choice out there. However, it is extremely common and the most common, and it's accessible for most people. But unmedicated childbirth means that you deliver your baby without the use of drugs, and also usually it refers to without other interventions such as Pitocin. However, I've been to many births that maybe we needed a little bit of Pitocin or other form or tool to help get things going, and the mom was still able to deliver without an epidural, without any pain medication. So you can see how the language can get a little bit confusing there. The reason that a lot of women might choose to have a natural birth is mainly to reduce the need for further medical interventions. So sometimes what can happen if we do use an epidural or pain meds or other interventions in birth, sometimes, not always that, but sometimes it can lead to the need for more interventions. It's what we call the cascade of interventions. Now, I'll talk a little bit later about how to lessen that fear, but that is one of the main reasons that people want to avoid pain medication, is to avoid some of those possible risk involved. Also, some parents decide, you know what, this is what my body was designed to do. This is what my body was born to do. And women have been doing this, for thousands of years without pain medication. If they can do it, I can do it. This is what my body was made to do. And they're genuinely excited, and they really want to experience that. Personally, I can say that there's really nothing that compares to natural childbirth. It's an amazing, amazing experience. It's such a unique experience. It's hard work. I always like to give a realistic picture for people that it is hard work to do natural childbirth. But like anything else in life, anything that takes a lot of hard work is usually worth it in the end, or the payoff is just so great. And it can be such a great, amazing experience for people. So Jessica has a question about what is Pitocin. Thank you for asking that. I sometimes take for granted that not everyone has that same vocabulary. So Pitocin is a medication that is sometimes given in the hospital to induce labor, meaning get labor started if it hasn't started on its own, or it's sometimes given if labor has slowed down or stalled, and for some reason your provider has recommended, you know what, we would really like this labor to progress a little bit faster, so we're going to give a little Pitocin for that. Pitocin is essentially the synthetic version of oxytocin. I can't say the word oxytocin without doing jazz hands. Oxytocin. Oxytocin is your body's natural, going back, keep hitting buttons. Oxytocin is the hormone responsible for childbirth, essentially. Oxytocin is what causes the uterus to start to contract, which is the function needed to birth a child. Your womb, your uterus has to contract a lot so that your cervix can dilate and then push the baby out. So oxytocin is what causes that physical function in the body. Oxytocin also is what we call the love or happiness hormone, because it's released every time we're happy and loved, or kissed on the cheek, or massaged on the shoulders, or hugged. So skipping forward a little bit, that's really one of the best things that we can do to help our chances of achieving a natural childbirth, is focusing on what are ways that we can increase our oxytocin naturally. If we can increase our oxytocin naturally, we can hopefully avoid the need for Pitocin, which again is the synthetic version of oxytocin. So ways that we increase oxytocin, that's part of my job that I do as a doula all the time. I call myself an oxytocin creator or protector. Is I like to keep the environment calm in the hospital room. I like to touch and love on my moms a lot. I rub their shoulders, I squeeze their hips, I hold their hand. I make sure that their jaw is relaxed and their shoulders are relaxed, just by simple, movements of the hand. And those simple things can do can do a lot when it comes to increasing oxytocin naturally. Cool. So moving on, let's talk a little bit more clearly about what is an epidural, right? So an epidural is known as a pain relieving intervention birthing people may choose when they're giving birth. And then the explanation usually stops there, but I like to get people a little more familiar with it. So what does an epidural really do, and how is it done? So essentially an epidural it's a local anesthetic, similar to, I'm sure it's not the same thing, but it's similar to, if you go to the dentist and they numb a certain area of your mouth, it's a local anesthetic injected into the epidural space, which is the space surrounding the tough protective coverings of the spinal cord. So this injection, when it's put in, blocks the nerves from sensory and motor nerves from basically the top of the womb down, which translates to effective pain relief and immobilization of the lower body. So, and how it is inserted is essentially the anesthesiologist will give a first one-time injection in the spine, so it numbs that area, and then they'll go in with a needle, and the needle goes in a small, tiny little catheter, plastic catheter tube is inserted through the needle and is kind of threaded part way down the spinal column. The needle comes out, and then that little plastic catheter tube stays in, and then a giant piece of tape gets stuck to your back so that that tube doesn't come out. And then from that tube, that tube is hooked up to a bag of medicine or anesthetic, which is continually dripped through your body using gravity, essentially. And so everywhere that medication gets dripped through your body is going to be numb. So that's essentially how it works, along with an epidural. So you're going to be hooked up to the bag of medicine, obviously going through your spine. You will also have continuous monitoring on your baby after that point. You'll have blood pressure checks every 15 minutes or so, and a pulse check as well. So there are some things that come along with an epidural. It's not like sometimes we paint that picture in Hollywood where, you know, mom's in labor and she's all miserable, and then we have like a cheesy cutaway, and then she's just laying in bed and she's super happy now because she's got her drug and there's nothing hooked up to her and she's just, you know, laying in bed all happy. Well, you know, really, the happy part is usually true when I have moms that, you know, are in a lot of pain and they're like, I think it's time for me to get an epidural, and they get an epidural. They're usually very happy after that point. But there's also some not so fun things that come along with that, like being hooked up to more cords and more testing and things like that. And then some women, I find, and it really differs from mom to mom, but a lot of moms really hate that sensation of not being able to move their legs or feel their legs. You know, it kind of feels like you have tree trunks for thighs. That's how it's been explained to me often. And so not being able to kind of move your body around is one of the main reasons, especially for moms who tend to want to kind of stay in control a little bit more. They don't like that feeling. They don't like that experience. So, and that again really differs from person to person. So like everything else, like every tool that we have available to us, epidurals can have side effects and can have risk associated with them. Some risk include a dangerous drop in blood pressure. So that it's one of the common side effects of a epidural, which can be life-saving if, let's say, you have extremely high blood pressure. Perhaps you have a disease called preeclampsia, which causes extremely high spikes in blood pressure. I have seen an epidural used to lower that blood pressure, not necessarily for pain medication, but just to lower the blood pressure. If you have really low blood pressure, that could be a concern. They do administer IV fluids to epidural patients to counteract that cause, that drop in blood pressure. Some of the more rare, less common side effects that can occur with an epidural include headaches or a spinal headache, which is no fun, trouble urinating, infection of the catheter site, and or damage to the epidural space is possible, but not very common. Well, let's talk next about the dangers of intervention a little bit. So birth is an incredibly individualized experience, right? And there's no real way of determining what's going to be right and what's going to be wrong for you. Like I say, there's no crystal ball during birth. Every decision we make is going to be based on lots of factors, and sometimes there's not always a clear answer to what's going to be right for you. You know, as a doula, I find that it's my job to help people understand what their options are, understand what the risk and benefits are, not to make decisions for anyone, but just to help them think through the pros, the cons, and what's going to align best for their birth goals. We don't have time to get into all of the interventions that are possible during a birth, but we have seen through research that the use of an epidural can have a slight increase in the risk of needing the use of forceps, vacuum extraction, or even C-sections. So those are some pretty serious risks to kind of hear out loud. Longer recovery as well can be common for an epidural. However, I do want to say that from my experience working in the birth field for so long, I have seen that the risk associated with an epidural when it comes to, increasing your chance of other interventions or a cesarean or a long labor, those risks tend to really get lowered extremely to almost non-existent risk factors if we wait to get an epidural at least till active labor has taken place. So that generally translates to if you're 6 or 7 centimeters along, then if you choose to get an epidural at that point, the risk associated with, a long labor or a C-section risk tend to be a lot lower. The problem is if we and this is what's very common, is if a mom knows that she wants to get an epidural, sometimes she'll go into the hospital when she's in labor and she'll be like, all right, I'm here, give me my drugs. And, but her body, maybe if it's not far enough along in that natural process, things can get slowed down a little bit, and labor can sometimes stall. And if she's, once she gets her epidural, she's stuck in bed for the rest of her labor, and not being able to move around and move the hips a little bit can sometimes delay that natural process. So I just wanted to mention that if your goal, is to kind of wait and see, or if your goal of not using pain medication is because you want to minimize those risks, I think that's great. And I always like to give the goal of, you know what, honey, if you can just get yourself to 6 or 7 centimeters first, then you've really done such a great job of lowering those risk factors for you and your baby. So, in talking about how to get to those 6 or 7 centimeters, or if you want to go all of birth without pain medication, what are some ways that we can help with that, right? So it kind of starts with preparing in pregnancy, right? You can't just kind of walk into the hospital in labor and be like, okay, time to have a baby. What do I do now? It takes a little bit of preparation. I can't emphasize enough the importance of going to a good childbirth education class. If you are planning to go completely unmedicated, it's really important to understand what the stages of labor are. There's essentially there's 3, 4, 5 different stages of labor, depends on how you categorize it. And they each have their own unique strategies that we can use and implement to help us through each process. So that's something that I go over a lot in my childbirth classes. We kind of break down each stage of labor and different strategies for each one. So mentally preparing for birth can be really helpful in educating yourself about the birthing process and what to expect. But also consider the physical aspects of childbirth. So childbirth in itself is a very physical experience. I remember after my childbirth, and I was pretty young when I had my first, I was 25 and I was in pretty good shape. But after my first, I remember leaving the hospital just sore everywhere, like my shoulders, my arms, my legs, my hips, my back. Like I was just so sore, and it really kind of surprised me how sore I was. I was just like, oh my God, I used every single muscle in my body for that birth, didn't I? So consider that if you were, looking to strengthen your leg muscles, let's say you're planning to run a marathon, then you're not going to, go up to the starting line on the day of the marathon and just expect to be able to run a marathon. So similarly with childbirth, you want to prepare your body, and the biggest muscle, the muscle that has to work the hardest during childbirth is the uterus, which is the womb, which is where your baby lives. The uterus is a very powerful muscle that deserves that same attention. It must be strong. It must be well nourished to successfully birth a baby. Now, unlike our leg muscles or our arm muscles that we can, warm up and we can flex and, lift weights to help build its strength, really the best way that we can build strength in our uterus is to eat really, really well in pregnancy. Now, I think this is pretty obvious to most new moms. It's kind of sometimes one of our first concerns when we get pregnant is, oh my gosh, like I really got to pay attention to what I'm eating, right? But I think understanding a little bit more about the benefits of eating well can help us stay on top of that good nutrition, which, let's be honest, is easier said than done, right? So overall, the main goal of a proper pregnancy nutrition is to expand your blood supply to aid in the growth of a healthy baby, a healthy placenta, and a healthy uterus, which again, your uterus is going to work really hard on the day you give birth. All right, let's talk about movement a little bit. Let's talk about movement in pregnancy, and then I also want to talk a little bit about movement during labor. So for most people, exercise is safe and very encouraged during pregnancy. This can be harder to do in the first trimester when we're feeling so tired and sluggish and nauseous. That's okay. Do what you can do, right? Don't beat yourself up if you can't do what the person next to you is doing, or you can't do what these lovely Barbie looking women are doing in the picture here, right? So the two most common gauges for your level of activity are how active you were prior to becoming pregnant and the level of exercise you currently feel physically comfortable with. So those are two big distinctions. So, I've known women who have been runners their entire life. They get pregnant and they think, oh, I'm not allowed to run anymore because I'm pregnant. No, 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 no. If you were already a runner, if you were already very active, if that's what you did every day, you should be able to continue that activity. Sure, check in with your doctor and make sure that that is approved. But in general, I see that if you've already been doing something before, continue doing it. But you also have to take into account, how are you feeling now? Just because you used to run a marathon every day doesn't mean that you can necessarily do that anymore. So it's so important to tune into your body and make sure that you're listening to what your body and your baby are telling you. If you start feeling lightheaded, that's a telltale sign that you're pushing it too hard, because that's really the biggest risk factor when it comes to exercise in pregnancies. That if you're really pushing, moving, then your blood is pumping, and that oxygen that is needed for that exerts a lot of stress on the blood flow that's going to baby. So if you start feeling lightheaded, your baby's starting to get lightheaded, kind of metaphorically in there too, and that's the risk factor that we want to avoid. So I already talked a bit about exercise dangers, but one that I didn't mention was your center of gravity changes a lot when you're pregnant. And so if you're doing kind of complicated pregnancy exercises in pregnancy that involve balance or like fast movements, that's when we can get in the danger of falling and hurting ourselves, because our center of gravity really is so different. I remember when I was pregnant, I tried to go bowling, and I've never been a great bowler, but I've never been a terrible bowler. And I remember I just could not get the bowling ball down the center of the aisle. It was just gutter ball after gutter ball, because my whole center of gravity was just so different. And so that kind of causes a lot more risk of slipping or falling. Also be mindful if you're exercising in a hot environment. You don't want to get overheated, and you don't want to do exercises that involve a lot of twisting movements while standing. That can cause some issues as well. All right, let's talk about breath for a second. So the power of breathing is definitely one of your best tools that you can use during pregnancy and also in childbirth. So this is something we talk about in our childbirth class, but I know what you're probably thinking. You're thinking it looks something like or some sort of, fancy breathing technique, but not at all. I am not a fan of lead breathing or fancy breathing techniques, because I've really just seen them not work, and they tend to just get women a little bit hyperventilated. Honestly, if you're breathing a lot, you tend to get a little lightheaded, and that's the last thing that we want in labor, right? But that's not to say that the breath is not an extremely powerful tool that we can use to help us. So, and I think instinctually, a lot of us, when we are stressed or if we are in pain, then we tend to go to our breath first with just a deep breath, right? And that in itself can be so helpful. So if you can tune into your breath during labor, you've really got a good friend there in your own breath. Now, as a doula, a lot of times what I'll do for my clients when I'm in the birth room with them is if I notice that they are struggling or they seem a little bit stressed or they look like they're having a really hard time handling those contractions, then I'll tune into their breath and see what they're doing. And then I might just give a little bit of guidance. I might just come up and put a gentle hand on her shoulder and just, guide her in that breathing by just simply going, give me a nice, slow, deep breath in and let it out. And that's all it takes sometimes. What's not helpful, and if there's any partners or dads watching that are planning to help in the labor room, something that's not very helpful is to walk up to a laboring woman and go, "Hey, hun, slow down your breathing." Instead, we want to connect, we want to slow down, and we just want to gently guide them. Pregnant women or laboring women tend to be very good mirrors. They tend to reflect back what we're doing. So if we can audibly guide them through their breathing, the goal being to just slow down the breathing and get nice deep breaths in there, then we can really, really help her out in those tough moments. Sometimes if she's having a really, really tough moment, then I like to do a little more guidance where I might just do what I'm doing and guide her in that very, very visual, very audible way to get her kind of past that tough contraction. Now, I can't stress enough the importance of breathing, because every time we breathe, and I like to say this to moms in labor, I'm like, take a nice deep breath in for your baby, because that's really what we're doing. The more oxygen we're getting into our bodies, the more oxygen and good, healthy blood we're getting to our baby's body as well. Your body needs more oxygen to function as your baby grows. Your baby requires plenty of oxygen to grow properly. You can also receive relief from body aches when you have adequate oxygen throughout your body. So deep breathing promotes relaxation and stress relief. And those two right there, that combination of relaxation and stress relief is such a powerful tool to help get you through labor. So if you're not used to intentionally breathing or deep breathing, and by deep breathing, I mean, we don't want our breathing to be up here in our chest. We want it to be down lower in our diaphragm, and or you can kind of see your belly moving up and down, in and out. So if you're not familiar with that or used to that, then you can totally practice that anytime. If you need some help practicing that, go to a good yoga class and just tell them, hey, I want to be a better breather for my baby. And they could totally help you with that. A good test, sometimes we do this in our childbirth class, is we'll have the moms sit around and we'll put a timer on for 1 minute, and we'll just have them breathe naturally for a minute and count how many breaths per minute are they doing. And if your breaths per minute are naturally in the like 15 to 20 or more range, that's a sign that you're not deeply breathing. If you can get to the more 8 to 10 to 12 per minute range of breathing, that's considered more deep, slow breathing. And that's the more relaxed breathing that we like to see, and that can help you in childbirth as well. So go ahead and practice that, every day. At the end of the day, I like to encourage what we call baby breaks. So at the end of the day or in the middle of the day, just lay down in bed or lay down on your couch and just tune into your baby. Just take a little baby break to say, all right, I'm just going to forget that pile of laundry over there. I'm going to forget the dishes in the sink. I'm just going to lay down and tune into my baby. And I'm going to breathe deep for my baby. I'm going to talk to my baby and say, hey, what's up, dude? I'm really excited to meet you soon. Rub your belly. And when you do that, when you tune in, your stress levels go down. And when your stress levels go down, baby's stress levels go down. So in childbirth, if we see a baby who's looking a little bit stressed out, and the only tool we have to gauge that is their heart rate, which is not not to say it's not an exact tool. So just because your baby's heart rate might be a little bit high doesn't necessarily mean they're stressed out, but sometimes that can be a sign of that. And so if we see a baby whose heart rate is kind of boop, 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 really high, then the first thing we tend to do is get mom to breathe deep and breathe calmly. And that can sometimes just help that baby's heart rate go boop, boop, boop down. Baby's happy as a clam. Another tip I like to give moms in labor, sometimes if they seem a little bit anxious, if they're a little bit jumpy, if they don't like being touched, I'll say, that's all right. I don't have to touch. You know, sometimes the nurses have to touch, so that can be hard. But what I'll have them do is I'll have them just take their own hand and rub their belly in a nice slow circle. And I'll just tell them, hey, rub your belly and just tell your baby that everything's okay. And sometimes that act of them just touching themselves, touching their own babies, and verbally saying that everything's okay, it sort of helps them switch gears a little bit and calm down. As a doula, I don't do anything medical. I can't write you a prescription for drugs or diagnose what's going on, but I often like to give prescriptions out for massages. So to my clients, I'll say, I'm going to write you a prescription to go get 2 massages this month minimum, because, why not? I mean, if we can pamper ourselves when we're pregnant, it's the best time you can pamper yourself. But it's really, I don't even like to use the word pampered for pregnancy, because getting a massage or getting some body work done in pregnancy is such good self-care for yourself and for your baby. So I can't stress enough how wonderful it is to treat yourself to a massage throughout pregnancy, especially towards the end there, where your body's going to be aching, and it can help so much. Remember early on in the webinar, we were talking about oxytocin, and how amazing it is and how helpful it is to get a labor going and to have a successful unmedicated labor. You need lots of oxytocin. Well, I've had several times I've been working with my clients in early labor, and they're in labor, but it's early labor and things are just not progressing. We're like, man, why is this labor not, getting into that active labor spot that we really want? And so I'm like, you know what? I know a massage therapist that's open right now. Let's go by and see if she can just give you a nice massage. And I've had several times that we've done that with a client. And after that massage is over, boom, she's in active labor, because that release of oxytocin that happens during a massage releases so much oxytocin that it can really jumpstart a labor. Now, that's not to say that you need to avoid a massage in pregnancy to avoid preterm labor. Our bodies are much smarter than that. So don't worry, if you can't overdo the oxytocin. You're not going to put yourself into labor because of too much oxytocin too early, but it is going to help your body stay nice and calm and de-stressed and prepare it physically for a good childbirth experience. So body work is something that, I've been talking about massage a lot, but chiropractic care can also be very helpful. I know that that's sort of a loaded topic for some people, but a chiropractor, I love when I do have clients that are open to that, because I've found that if there's any tension in the pelvic area, or if there's something out of place or out of whack in the pelvis, a chiropractor, a good chiropractor, can sometimes realign the pelvis or realign the spine or the bones and allow for physically more space during childbirth. And during childbirth, getting a baby out of your body, it's a lot to do with the space that's there. So if you've got something that's off kilter or twisted, and a chiropractor can realign that and get that back into its proper place, can really up your chances of having a smoother delivery for sure. And if you need any recommendations for a local chiropractor in your area, we definitely have many people that we can recommend for that, and also for prenatal massage as well. And then talking about body work or massage and touch, I cannot emphasize enough the importance of that during childbirth. If your goal is an unmedicated childbirth, then you really need to be surrounding yourself with a birth team that's not afraid to massage and touch and be there physically with you. I've worked with lots of dads who are all about it. And then I've worked with some dads that are like, I'm just going to be off in the corner and let you do your thing. So, as a doula, my favorite is when I have the dads that are really hands-on and they really want to help, but they just don't really know exactly how to. So then I can just go over and show them, hey, why don't you squeeze her hips like just like this, and she's going to love it. Or, hey, let me show you how you can rub her back like this. It's going to feel really good, during her contractions. And then the dads are, they're on it and they're good. And then, if they're working on the back, then maybe I'll go and do like a head rub. So that's my easy, fast tip of the day during labor. If you can get someone to kind of do a head massage or a neck rub, but I love the scalp, kind of in the scalp there. Oh, it's relieves so much tension. And that's the goal that we want for a natural childbirth. The more tension we can relieve from the body, the better off she's going to feel, and the more likely she'll have a successful natural childbirth as well. So I can't really go through all of the body work things that we do as doulas, but if you can make it to one of our comfort measure boot camps that we offer throughout the year, that's a free class that we offer throughout the year, where we go through a lot of the physical things that we do as doulas, the different places that we press on the hips or squeeze, or the different ways that we massage, and what tends to be really helpful for moms in labor, different positions that she can try, different ways she can move her body. That's really one of the most helpful things, the most helpful tools you can do, combined with good breath work, good body movements, can be so key to achieving a natural childbirth. So if you can make it to one of those classes, it's a great place to come to, especially bring your partner. I put a lot of pressure on the partners in those classes. I'm like, all right, guys, like, listen up. I'm going to show you, how to do this and how to do that. And it's your job to do this in labor. All right. And it's fun. We also do a lot of that kind of discussion and a lot of practicing different comfort techniques in our childbirth class as well. So if you don't see a childbirth class on our website that works for your date, just let us know. Oftentimes we'll have people write in that says, my due date is XYZ. I'd really like to take a class. And then we can say, we actually had someone else, with a similar due date want to take our class. Why don't you two split a private class or something together to help on the cost? We can always do a private class in your home, and you can always split that with other people as well to make it a little more cost effective for you. As a pregnant woman, you are allowed to create your birth dream team. That's your choice. You get to decide who's going to be around you during your birth to a certain extent. There's certain things we can't control. We can't always control what nurses are going to be on call. We can't necessarily control which provider is going to deliver us, but we can choose, our partner, who we want to be there, any friends or family members that you choose to be there. And that's a very common question that I have people ask me is, should I have my mom there? Should I have my friend who really wants to see a birth there? Should I have them there? And I always just say, if they're going to add to your experience in a beneficial, positive way, then yeah, have them there. But if you're allowing them into the birth space only for their benefit, probably not a good idea to have them there, because birth is such an intimate, intense experience that you want to be surrounded by people who are going to benefit you positively, who can help you through that experience. It's very, very sweet and nice if you want to allow, someone that's never seen a birth before to come to your birth, sure. And if that doesn't bother you, go for it. I think that's really, really sweet. But when it comes to in-laws and sisters and, your mother or your dad, if you feel like they're the type of person who's going to add to your experience, then go for it. If not, then maybe don't have them there. And here's the trick that I always give to my clients. I say, don't blame it on yourself. Don't say that you don't want them there. Just tell them, I'm sorry. There's a very strict hospital policy rule that we just learned that only allows 2 support people in the birth room at one time, or 1 support, whatever number you need that to be. You know, if you have your partner and your doula, then say, I'm sorry, we only allow 2 support people in at a time. And then it's not your fault, right? It's just the hospital's fault that they can't come. All right. So other than the people who might be in your room, think about who you choose to be your medical provider. Now, I know in certain areas in our high country, we don't always have a choice when it comes to where we need to deliver our babies. But there's often more choice out there than we think. So if you have any questions about like, hey, I'm being seen at XYZ and I'm not really enjoying it, I'm not really jiving with my care provider, you know, where else could I go? Don't hesitate to reach out to us, because we've worked in this area a long time. We know a lot about a lot of the hospitals around here, and we can sort of guide you and help you understand the differences and find a care provider team that might fit your MO a little bit better, right? So always remember that this is your birth. This is your choice. When you choose your care provider, you're essentially hiring them. Like, I'm hiring you to help me have a healthy pregnancy. So you want to feel really good about that decision. You want to be able to trust your care provider and your medical team, right? So consider it psychologically, think about it that way. Think about it as, you know what, I'm hiring you to do this job. So don't be afraid to go around and interview different people for that job and see who aligns with your goals the best. And then, of course, I might sound a little biased, but consider having a doula at your birth as well. I can't say how much positive impact a doula can have on your childbirth experience. If you want to have an all-natural birth, an epidural birth, a cesarean birth, it don't matter what kind of birth you have. Doulas their job is to help make that experience the best that it can possibly be. And of course, you know, what I always say to my, when I'm interviewing with a couple, a big concern a lot of the time is, oh, well, I don't want someone to stand in between me and my husband, or I don't want him to feel like he's being replaced. And I just say, look, like, you know, he knows you really, really well. I know birth really, really well. So together we just make this dream team where we can help the mom have the best birth ever. So at least our values at High Country Doulas are very much towards helping partners experience birth together if that's what they want to do. I have worked with some couples where the dad or the partner just, it's not their thing. So they're maybe in the waiting room or in the corner of the room, and that's okay. But I'd say 99% of the clients that we work with, the dad or the partner, they want to be there. They want to be hands-on, but they just don't always know how to. So that's when we can step in and just show them how to support that person who they love more than anything in the world, how to support them through that experience. So there's a lot more that doulas do, but I'll leave it at that. And if you have any more questions about that, of course, don't hesitate to reach out to us and let us know how we can help. Positive attitude is also one of those key tools. Like, if I had to pare it down to the most helpful tools in labor, I'd pare it down to breath, body movement, and, you know, massage and touch, and attitude. So if you can keep a really positive attitude, you know, even if things aren't going the way you want them to, let's say, oh my goodness, all of a sudden my body has like blown into preeclampsia and I have to get an induction tomorrow. That's a really scary situation. I've had clients that exact situation has happened to. But the clients that I've worked with that those scary, unexpected things have happened to, when they're able to keep a really positive attitude, they've had the best experiences and the best births. So your birth doesn't always look like what you envision or what you want it to be, and that's okay. But if you can keep that positive attitude and believe in yourself and believe that you're doing everything that you can do, then you're going to have a great birth. And that's my wish for everyone, is that you just have a great birth. And again, that doesn't always look like what we envision, and that's okay, so long as you can leave saying, you know what, I felt like I was in control. I felt like I was empowered, and I felt like I was being a part of that decision-making team. And I feel like I did everything I could then you can leave whatever birth that is feeling like you did your best and that you had a great experience. And that's just something that I like to do as a doula, is help with that process. Additional resources, I'm going to email a list of some of these additional resources out. I love any books by Ina May Gaskin's Guide to Childbirth. My favorite thing about those books, though, are the birth stories that are in the beginning of the book. Reading those birth stories of woman after woman after woman sharing their birth story in a really positive way. Such a great way to get your mind in the game and get that positive mindset around birth. The second half of her books, sometimes I caution people against reading them and taking it. You got to take it with a grain of salt, because her books were written back when birth was not a pretty, like, we really had to fight for our voice and fight for our rights. And because of people like Ina May, we don't have to do that as much anymore. So what I like to tell my clients, I don't like them walking into birth feeling like they have to have their fist up and like ready for punching. I don't want you to feel that way going into birth. So I like to talk through a lot of those fears and lots of those details beforehand. So anyway, I digress. Gentle Birth Choices by Barbara Harper is really good. Childbirth Without Fear by Grant Lee Dick is really good. Natural Childbirth, The Bradley Way, is a really great book for couples who want to, have the partner really involved, but he's not really sure how. So those are just a few resources, and I'll email that list out as well. Thank you so much, everyone. This was a blast. This was super fun. Thank you so much for coming on. If you thought that this was helpful, please share on social media. That's always a great way for you to help spread the word about our webinars and our classes. And good luck, everyone, on your upcoming birth, and let us know how we can help.